Good morning, everybody. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here this morning. I actually did my MBA at Lancaster University, and it's wonderful to be back here today speaking to architecture students. I'm going to tell you a story about a school that was actually transformed through architecture. That is the Antwerp International School, which is located in Belgium. Um, so, this school, when we got there in about 2018, was, to say the least, tired, traditional, complacent. I think the school had had it easy for a long time, and teachers were used to a very easy life. It was also compliant in the sense that it was delivering the international school curriculum, but it wasn't really pushing the boundaries. It wasn't saying, what can we do better? How can we actually offer a better service to the students at this school? Now, the school is a K through 12, so that's kindergarten through to grade 12 school, located in the leafy suburbs outside of Antwerp. The building that we were presented with, that we had to design, reflected those attributes of being tired and being complacent and being actually a very, very grim space to go to school. But luckily for this school, they had just employed a dynamic new head of school, Andreas Koini. Now, Andreas had a very, very clear vision of where he wanted to be going forward. But it was just what was unclear was the path that needed to be taken to get there. There were a variety of things that were driving this, both internally and externally. So the first thing was that this building, the picture you just saw, was in a sorry state. It was an older building. The interior of the building was an old disused gym, which was just neglected and becoming a worse and worse space for students to be. In addition to that, there was a growing awareness of the importance of STEM, a global awareness of this. And Andreas wanted to actually make the school a preeminent school for STEM learning. So those were two drivers. But beyond that, and probably more important, were the drivers based on curriculum. So many international schools deliver what is the IB curriculum, so that's the International Baccalaureate Organization, which gives three curriculums: the primary years, the middle years, and the IB diploma. So Antwerp was delivering these three sets of curricula. What's interesting is that the IB also speak a lot about approaches to learning, but Andreas was aware that these approaches to learning, which relate to how students communicate, the social aspect, all of those dimensions of learning, were not really being delivered in the school. He wanted to go even further than that, in fact, and he was very interested in NEASC. NEASC is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, which is located in Boston. And NEASC offers a foundational accreditation for a school, so you have to meet a basic level to get their foundational accreditation. But beyond that, and really excitingly, they've developed 10 learning principles. And schools who really want to push the boundaries, who really want to excel, are so excited by these principles because they are all have all been developed to create true student-centered learning. Now, it's quite a difficult process to integrate these learning principles into a school. And one of the things that NEASC does say is you do need the right kind of space to be able to implement them. So Andreas had chosen 4 of them, sort of actually after the project had started. And part of our job was to actually look at all these things. Look, obviously, the building, obviously, the STEM desire, obviously, the IB, obviously, NEASC. Use all these drivers to inform our thinking. And just to add another layer of complexity, they decided they would actually rethink their whole mission, vision, and values. So we had to take cognizance of that as well. Pull all of this together and work with the school to create the space to support the transition that Andreas and his team envisaged. So this came together in the STEM zone. Now, not just for this project, but for actually most of the projects that we do, we know that there are a couple of key factors that lead to a successful project. The first one is participatory design. And when we use that term, we mean literally from the start of the project to the finish of the project. So we spent many weeks with the school working with stakeholders, all stakeholders, students, parents, teachers, and some schools said to us, why do you want to speak to the 5-year-olds? And we go, because they have an important message. We want to understand how they are learning. We want to understand how they are experiencing this school. So we spoke to everybody. We worked with everybody. That was just the beginning, though. It's not as though you do that stakeholder engagement. You go, okay, thanks, we've got all the answers, we can go and design. No, it's an iterative process. So we worked through the whole project, constantly feeding back what we were thinking, working with them to make sure that we actually came to a solution which was a true vision for the entire school community. The other thing which the architects are, of course, less involved in, but what Andreas was doing in the background was professional development and constant reflection. Because as I said earlier, implementing these learning principles is not easy. And some educators will resent this, they'll fight against this. So it's about obviously taking people, training people, showing them that there are positive benefits to implementing such things as the learning principles. So he was doing all of that work in the background. The message here is that it's the participatory design, it's the preparation of the community that then comes together and creates a spatial alignment with the desired learning vision. So this was actually a fabulous day on site. This was the gymnasium. We were punching in the holes for the new skylights. It was, to be honest, almost spiritual. It was literally letting in the light. The point I want to make about this is that this whole project was a journey. It wasn't as though the vision for learning was fully formed at the beginning and just go away and design the building to fulfill that vision. We were all working in tandem. The school was changing. We as architects were changing. The whole process had to be very, very flexible. But what's interesting is that architecture not only supports change, but it also is a very, very strong catalyst for change. And this is what has happened in Antwerp. So one of the tenets of the IB organization and their curriculum is a deep focus on transdisciplinary learning. So this means that mathematics, science, history don't work in isolation. They come together. There's a cross-pollination of ideas. But this wasn't happening in the building when we got there. So the idea was to open it up as much as possible, to create these links to the other subjects beyond, as well as the STEM subjects, and bring everything together in what was the old gymnasium, which is now the collaboration zone, and thereby promote transdisciplinary learning. The other thing, something which is very, very dear to Andreas's heart, is this idea of agency. Agency means that the students and the educators actually are empowered to use the building as they see fit. So they might have a task and they can choose the space which is best suited to that task. But it goes beyond that. It also goes in the way that they move through the building. So as they move through the building, it's intuitive. They can see what's happening. Even if I'm a little grade 3 student, I'm coming into that building and I feel safe because I have this sense of the organization as a whole. Part of that also relies on the transparency. There's transparency to the outside. There's transparency within the volume. And moving on further into transparency, there's also the connections between the interior life and the exterior life of a typical classroom space make it very easy for this agency to occur. So these two girls are part of that science class, but they can pop out, do a bit of work, go back in again. They can still see what's happening, and equally, the educator can see them as well. So the building supports that idea of agency. Another important part of the IB is the so-called process of inquiry. And basically what that means is you're learning something through many different forms. It can be didactic teaching, it can be through a group collaboration. Maybe you're looking something up on the computer as these students are doing here. Many different ways of delivering the knowledge. But the point is you have to take the knowledge, you have to work with it yourself, you have to internalize it, you need to experiment. Thereafter, you want to share what you've done. So there's a period of assessment. And then after that, you reflect. What did I do well? What could I have done better? So the building has to support this. The way it does is in terms of providing a huge range of learning spaces. So many, many different opportunities for learning to take place. We spend a lot of time, not just with educational projects, but with all our projects, thinking, of course, about, neurodiversity, cognitive diversity, and demographic differences. And how do we design that landscape within a building to support people who maybe want a high intensity experience versus a low intensity experience, or anywhere in between. And of course, that can vary from day to day. I might want that one day, I might not want it the next day. It depends on my temperament, it depends on who I am as a person, it depends on the task at hand. So moving on from that, the experimentation, absorbing, the classrooms are big enough so that that student there, for example, can move away from the group. In the maths classroom, we found by actually lining the walls with writable glass, we changed the dynamic. The teacher was not at the head, the students were in control. They were in control of the entire space. What experimentation really needs is flexibility, and I said before, it's a K through 12 school. Even the youngest children are invited into this space. That's them in the morning having their mindfulness session, and then in the afternoon you've got a grade 12 literature class, the furniture's been pulled up, everybody's come together, it's complete flexibility. And then display, sharing, I'm proud of what I've done, I want you to see my robot, I want you to see my artwork. And again, it's other disciplines viewing what art students have done, it's the youngest seeing what the oldest have done, it's an educator seeing what their colleague has done, and everybody is continuously learning from each other. So we had a lot of feedback about the STEM zone, and it was really wonderful. What was so exciting about the staff feedback is that it wasn't a direct question about the STEM zone. All of this feedback arose when they were being asked about something completely different, about reflection on other work that they were doing, and unbidden, they started talking about the STEM zone. And that is the most powerful validation I think you can get, when you don't ask somebody, but they tell you without them asking. And obviously, it's changed the way they work. And they see that in the students, and they see that the students have agency, and it's working really well for them. Equally with the students, they loved the fact that there's a sense of space, there's a sense of community. When we first got there, there was no opportunity to socialize. They were literally sitting in the corridors, whereas this has transformed that aspect of their life at school, and of course has supported their learning as well. So it truly gladdens my heart. And then Andreas, of course, who acknowledges that this building has transformed learning at the school. It's become the heart of the school, and its story is not finished. It learns. We go back, we see how they're using the space, we see what's changed, and it will be a catalyst, not only for in and of itself, but also for the campus going forward. Thank you.